Hey everybody, it's Peggy Hasenauer from the Kovler Diabetes Center. We've had the opportunity over the last few weeks to interview some amazing people. I have Jackie Walker with us today. Jackie, say hello.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being with us today, Jackie. We have known you for a long time, and I think um, your uh, your words today of encouragement, of inspiration, but even just keeping it real is okay. And Jackie, I would love for you to tell us a little bit about you and about how we first connected.
Like Peggy said, my name is Jackie Walker. I am a junior at Emory in Atlanta, and I have had type 1 diabetes since March 5th of 2012, so
Wow.
about 8 years, and I've been a patient of Kovler for the majority of that
Hmm.
time. I
Yeah.
honestly don't know the entire date, partially because I was 12. Um, and wasn't really on my mind to keep track of that kind of thing.
That's
Um,
okay. We're just happy that you're here and that you are thriving in life and doing well. And I've been thinking about you and many college students that we care for in terms of physically having to move yourself home for the rest of the semester. Not
mhm.
easy. And trying to think about finals and classes, and also trying to understand where we are today with living at home with loved ones that maybe we haven't lived with in a while. So tell me how that's going.
Yeah, so I was really fortunate. I was able to drive back home from Atlanta, but it's a 10-hour drive, and we all know driving with type 1 can be a little. You gotta keep an eye on stuff. But living with my parents after being basically independent for 3 years has been a wild is not the right word, but it's the only word I can really think of. I used to have a mini fridge in my room full of like my insulin and like my low blood sugar stuff. And so now when my blood sugar drops, I gotta make my way all the way to the kitchen rather than kind of roll out of bed. Um, and it's just been really interesting and just different. It's very high school-ish, at least to me, to live with my parents who are now kind of watching my blood sugars and just much more aware of it than my roommates were or my friends are. And it's just, instead of just me managing it, it's now my entire family helping me manage it. But at the same time, I'm ready to manage it on my own. Like I'm ready to be independent, if that makes
Sure.
sense.
No,
At
totally.
college I can make mistakes.
Sure. So tell me what the pros and cons of that are. So in a good way, you've got some, you've got no better people than your parents who love you and your family who loves you, looking out for you. But name some of the pros and cons of that, if you don't mind, because I think naming
Absolutely.
it sometimes helps us figure out how to handle it.
Yeah, so it's definitely a lot easier for me to be like, "Hey, my blood sugar's low. Can you help me out here? Can you grab this for me because I can't grab it or something?" One of the cons is that, "Hey, is your blood sugar low?" Or they're just much more aware, which isn't necessarily a con. It's also a pro, but it's also, um, how do I, start to transition from being, a student living under my parents' roof to being an adult, um,
Sure.
and kind of, managing it on my own. One of the really great things about my parents and, how I manage my type 1 is that I've always been really independent. My mom never actually had to give me shots or anything. Even when I was right out of the hospital when I was like 12 or 11, I don't actually remember. But she never had to do that, and she still does not have to do that. Um, but it's just been more, people are just more aware of what my blood sugars are. And sometimes, when we're all living really closely together right now, and there's just a lot of a lack of privacy, it's one more person knowing my blood sugars and like another thing into my health, or just another person watching me that I just don't really care for too much. Does that make
I
sense? I
complete.
don't know if it does.
Of course it makes sense. I think we're all trying to figure this out. I'm a parent. I have two young children myself, school age, that are totally sick of me. I'm sure harassing them about whether or not they've done their math.
Exactly.
and what they've eaten for lunch. So I can only imagine. And it's hard for us as parents to sort of figure out when to sort of cut that. And you sometimes um, get back into roles that you were in when you were younger when we end up back in our parents' house.
Yeah.
So I think though what you can bring to the table is quite a bit of knowledge and understanding of your own diabetes in the context of being at home. So tell me what tips have worked for you. So your overall diabetes management, do you feel like it's been better, or do you feel like you've struggled a bit? And if so, how? I'm curious now that you're home, right? So you're not going to classes.
Mhm.
Your life is a little more predictable rather than unpredictable, if you will. How has that changed your diabetes management?
I think it's been different.
Okay.
Because, when I was at school, I walked 20,000 steps a day. Easy. Now I'm lucky if I make it to 4,000.
Okay.
Um, Especially because I live, up in downtown where they've kind of sort of closed some of the parks and we're not really supposed to be going out too much. It's just been really hard to try and, work out, get those steps in, see the sunshine, and just move around.
Sure.
So that has definitely impacted my blood sugars because um, at least when I first got home, I had to up my insulin dosages a little bit just to kind of compensate for that lack of activity.
Mhm.
In addition, I am no longer on as strict of a schedule as I was at college, for example. Like, if I don't need to wake up, an hour before class to get there. I can just wake up 5 minutes before, roll out of bed, and hop into my desk. And it doesn't matter if I'm 2 minutes late because the everyone's a little late every now and then, and you can blame it on network connectivity issues. Um, but at the same time, it's been a lot easier because now when my blood sugar is low, like, I'm not the only one who's like, oh, we're running out of low blood sugar supplies. The burden does not fall directly and only onto my shoulders anymore. Um, my parents are very, very capable and help. They're very, very capable, obviously, and they also know when I need to replenish supplies. And they know how to ensure that we have enough low blood sugar stuff. We have enough, insulin, needles for whatever, and just supplies in general. Um, and they're also, they're watching out for me as well. So
I,
there's
I,
that system,
I can
but
appreciate that. I think you
yeah,
bring up a really valid point that you have people looking out for you, and yet you're trying to figure out how to be more independent in terms of your management.
absolutely.
Have you been able to connect with Dr. Phillipson or Amy, who's of course, our lead diabetes educator, or the team? And what has that sort of virtual experience been like? So, have you had a formal virtual visit yet, or did you just talk to them on the phone? And how is that? How has that changed or not changed?
I honestly haven't yet had a virtual visit with Dr. Phillipson or
Mhm.
Amy quite yet. I know that at some point, one of my appointments is coming up sometime mid-May, so I will be having that appointment. Um, but one of the first things that my family and I did was make sure I had insulin for the next 3 months, pump supplies for the next 3 months. And I was really fortunate that my resupply date also happened to occur in early March. And so right before quarantine started. And so that hasn't been too much of an issue. And I tend to be pretty adaptable in situations. So it's been really good, especially knowing that Dr. Phillipson and Amy are there if and when I need them.
I can appreciate that. I think we spoke with another patient and friend earlier today who said the same thing. Who said it's just nice to know that they're around and available, and if I do need to connect with them, I can. And
Yes.
it's been great because they've been able to have this back and forth, regardless of the situation that we're in. There's been a lot on the media about COVID-19 and diabetes, and the struggle I've had with that as a clinician is that they often don't differentiate between the older adult with type 2 and severe complications, and then a young, otherwise healthy type 1 patient who is managing their blood sugars. And so I'm curious, when all this came out about sort of diabetes and COVID, and how did it make you feel? And how do you feel about it now? And what do you think maybe people who don't understand the connection should know?
This is definitely a topic that I know I've been very outspoken with in my own family. There have been times when I will, hop out of bed, I'll have studied for a bit and I'll start to check Facebook. And the first thing that comes on my page is CDC. People with diabetes are more at risk for COVID. And it is so disappointing to me because type 1 is very unique in that it's often confused with type 2. um, and I work a lot. I work really hard to make sure my blood sugars are good and healthy
Hmm.
and maintained. And one of the really difficult things I've had trouble with is trying to figure out what is the impact of COVID on someone with type 1 as opposed to type 2.
Hmm.
Because that feels like a difference worth knowing. Um, and it's very, very difficult for me, and for just every time I see it, people with diabetes are more likely to get it. And I just think that, that's not quite it. It's a little more nuanced than that. Um,
Correct.
and it's just really hard and really difficult and really heartbreaking at times to just be grouped in together when this is not necessarily my disease. Um,
I can appreciate that. And I think what you're experiencing is what many people with type 1 are experiencing, which is
mhm,
I am otherwise healthy, I'm younger, I have no other medical issues, my blood sugars are in good control, I
mhm,
have no complications of diabetes. And
mhm.
so that actually puts you at little to no additional risk than someone else, per se, your age.
Exactly.
But someone who has type 1, who maybe hasn't seen a doctor in several years, or whose blood sugar or hemoglobin A1C is very high, they can be more at risk for infection or inflammation, or COVID-19 or the flu, because their blood sugars are so erratic and out of control and they're not being managed. But
Mhm.
that's not you, and that's not often the vast majority of people we know with type 1 diabetes. So I appreciate you sharing your frustration with that, because I too share this perception with the media that we're talking about all the same types of people, and we're not. I
Mhm.
think that we've all realized that diabetes looks differently, even
Mhm.
among people who all have type 2 or all have type 1. Um,
Absolutely.
so I so I appreciate you sharing that. Um, Jackie, tell me if you have any tips for someone who maybe was newly diagnosed, and maybe they're 18, 19, 20, in college, newly diagnosed, and now they're home. What advice would you give them, or perspective would you give them in terms of managing their independence and autonomy with the relationship they have with their family that loves them and cares about them?
That is a fantastic question. I know one of the things that I have been taking to, start to take more control of my independence is, when I talk to my insurance company or my pump company or my insulin company, I have slowly started taking my parents' contact information off, not so that or I've been changing the primary contact information so that it's
I
no
think that's
longer,
cool.
yeah, so that it's no longer they're directly contacting my mother, they contact me first. And so things like dealing with insurance, I still have my mother as the primary, partially because I'm still learning how to do that.
Sure.
But if I can start to take control of how and when my pump supplies get delivered, that's a step in the right direction for me, because then that's me. That's my control over my independence kind of thing, if that makes sense.
Sure.
um, as well as for anyone who's newly diagnosed. Oh gosh, this is it's a really unpredictable time for everyone right now, and I know that having type 1 honestly only makes that worse because you're still learning, and it's a continuous learning process. I had to relearn my entire body once I first got home. And stopped moving around quite as much and just didn't live my normal life. Um, and it is difficult, but you will get through it. That's all I can really say.
I think that's fair, and I think there's so many resources out there that
Yeah.
people have benefited from, whether it's from the American Diabetes Association, The Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, fantastic resources. KovlerDiabetesCenter.org has tons of resources. And there's also many other opportunities to connect with people who have diabetes who are in this
Absolutely.
age range. So there's a couple of organizations that work specifically with and for um, young adults who are in college who have T1D. And I think that there's a lot of value in that. And so if people can take advantage of the resources in the chat rooms, but to your point, you made the most valuable point. Take control and accountability for your diabetes and your management. I
Yeah.
love that. I love what you said about helping people, even at a young age, figure out you can participate in the process of ordering your own supplies, right?
Mhm.
With a parent or without. You can have the pump company contact you directly. You can have the 1-800 numbers in your wallet and ready to go. What a fantastic piece of advice for young adults who maybe feel like they don't have control over this when in fact they do. Um,
Mhm.
Jackie, you have been such an advocate not only for people with diabetes, but so many people who struggle with various diseases and backgrounds. I'm curious what your career path is because you have such an empathetic heart and your intelligence really comes through. So tell me what you're
Thank
thinking about
you.
doing with your life.
So that's a fantastic question, and I'm still trying to figure that out. Currently, and I mean this without the irony it presents, I was really interested in the health implications of social isolation, and
Wow.
how that impacts our mental and physical health. But I've been interested in that since the fall. So before all of this happened. And it's going to be really interesting to look at how COVID-19 impacts our health now and in the future, and how social distancing, social isolation, lack of community ties, and just, humans are inherently social creatures. Just that change, how it's going to impact us in the long run. And I'm really interested to learn more about that, particularly the health implications.
Sure. Well, it's also interesting that you have, um, is it the CDC that's based in Atlanta? Is that
Mhm.
correct? Well,
Yes,
it's interesting you have the CDC in your own backyard once you get back down to Atlanta. And I hope for
absolutely.
you all the best. You have been an intern of ours, a patient of ours, and we are just honored and privileged to know you and your family, Jackie. And I can't thank you enough for your time today.
Absolutely. We love Kovler. Y'all have always been there for us, and I know you will continue to do so.
Great. And we'll be in touch with you because I want to hear more about your future career plans and I want to
Absolutely.
hear more about how things are going while you're at home. So hang in there
Absolutely.
and we'll talk soon.
You too.
Okay. Take care.
Thanks, Peggy.
Bye bye.